and welcome back to Friday Reads. It's been a minute, but we are back. In case you forgot, I'm Jill.
And I'm Julie, and it is good to be back. We took a month or so off at the end of summer reading, and I did some traveling, so we are going to start a new series of Friday Reads videos, and they are going to feature books that take place in different locations. So maybe they're locations you have visited, or maybe they're locations on your bucket list that you'd like to visit. So we're starting in the United States. So I've got our atlas out today, and today we are going to start with the Pacific Northwest. So books that take place up in Washington, Oregon, that area. So Jill, what's your first pick?
So my first one, when I think of the Pacific Northwest, I think about trees.
Yep.
So this is my first pick. It's The Overstory by Richard Powers, which actually won the Pulitzer Prize in fiction a while ago. This is an ambitious environmental fable of 9 main characters, 9 of them, that explores the relationship with nature, the psychology of why we're so bad at acting on climate change, our perception of time, the meaning of hope, and more. The Overstory is a sweeping impassioned work of activism and resistance that is also stunning evocation of the natural world. From the roots to the crown and back to the seeds, Richard Powers' 12th novel unfolds the concentric rings of interlocking fables that range from the antebellum New York to the late 20th century timber wars of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. There is a world alongside ours, vast, slow, interconnected, resourceful, magnificently inventive, and almost invisible to us. This is the story of a handful of people who learn how to see that the world and who are drawn up in its unfolding catastrophe. So if you're interested in environmental stuff and trees and the Pacific Northwest and Pulitzer Prize winning novels, this is the one for you.
All right, and my first pick is Heartsick by Chelsea Kane. This was published back in 2007, and it involves a damaged Portland detective, Archie Sheridan, who spent 10 years tracking Gretchen Lowell, a beautiful serial killer, but in the end, she was the one who caught him. 2 years ago, Gretchen kidnapped Archie, tortured him for 10 days, but instead of killing him, she mysteriously decides to let him go. She turned herself in, and now Gretchen has been locked away for the rest of her life, while Archie is in a prison of another kind. He's addicted to pain pills, unable to return to his old life, powerless to get those 10 horrific days off his mind. He's a different person, his estranged wife says, and he knows she's right. He continues to visit Gretchen in prison once a week, saying that he can only get her to confess as to the whereabouts of more of her victims, but even he knows the truth. He can't stay away from her. So this sounded like an intriguing book to me. They need to catch a killer, and maybe somehow Archie can free himself from Gretchen once and for all. Either way, Heartsick makes for one of the most extraordinary suspense debuts in recent memory. Like I said, this is back from 2007. It's actually the first book in the Archie Sheridan and Gretchen Lowell series, which they continue to go on with 6 more books. So just got a Heartsick.
My next one is called My Abandonment by Peter Rock. A 13-year-old girl and her father live in Forest Park, the enormous nature preserve in Portland, Oregon. There they inhabit an elaborate cave shelter, bathe in a nearby creek, store perishables at the water's edge, use a makeshift septic system, tend a garden, and even keep a library of sorts. Once a week, they go to the city to buy groceries and otherwise merge with the civilized world. But one small mistake allows a backcountry jogger to discover them, which derails their entire existence and ultimately provoking a deeper flight. This is based on a true story and told through startling, sincere voice of a young narrator, Carolyn, the girl. And it was actually based, this movie, Leave No Trace, is based on that book. So if you don't want to read the book, you can always watch the movie. I think it's pretty similar.
My second pick is Snow Falling on Cedars. Again, this goes way back. This is from 1994, actually, by David Gutterson. It's gripping, tragic, and densely atmospheric. Kind of looks that way from the cover that I'm holding up. It's a masterpiece of suspense on San Pedro Island, north of Puget Sound. It's a place so isolated that no one who lives there can afford to make enemies. But in 1954, a local fisherman is found suspiciously drowned, and a Japanese-American named Kabuo Miyamoto is charged with his murder. In the course of the ensuing trial, it becomes clear that what is at stake is much more than a man's guilt. For on this island, memories of a charmed love affair between a white boy and the Japanese girl who grew up to become Kabuo's wife, memories of land desired, paid for, and lost all come into play. Above all, this island is haunted by the memory of what happened to its Japanese residents during World War II, when an entire community was sent into exile while its neighbors watched. A book related to this, that's one of my favorite books, is Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford. So if those sound interesting to you, check out Snow Falling on Cedars. Maybe it's a book you read years ago, and maybe you want to read that one again.
So my next one is a memoir. This is Nothing Good Can Come from This, from Christy Coulter, who lives in Seattle, Washington. Christy Coulter inspired and incensed the internet when she wrote about what happened when she stopped drinking. Nothing Good Can Come from This is her debut, a frank, funny, and feminist essay collection by a keen-eyed observer no longer numbed into complacency. When Christy stopped drinking, she started noticing things, like when you give up a debilitating habit, it leaves a space, one that can be easily filled by mocktails or ice cream or sex or crafting. And when you cancel rosé season for yourself, you're left with just summer. And that's when you notice that the women around you are tanked, that alcohol is the oil in the motors that keeps them purring when they could be making other kinds of noise. So if you want to get angry about your drinking,
this might be the book for you. Oh, goodness. My third pick is Mink River by Brian Doyle. Again, I went back in the stacks to get some of these. So this one is from 2010. It takes place in a small fictional town on the Oregon coast. There's love affairs and almost love affairs, mystery and hilarity, bears, tears, brawls, boats, a garrulous logger and a silent doctor, rain and pain, Irish immigrants, mud and laughter. There's a Department of Public Works that gives haircuts and counts insects, a policeman who's addicted to Puccini, a philosophizing crow, beer, and berries. An expedition is mounted, a crime committed, and there's an unbelievably huge picnic on the football field. Babies are born, a car is cut in half with a saw. A river confesses what it is thinking. It's the tale of a town written in a distinct and lyrical voice, and readers will close the book more than a little sad to leave the village of Neowanaka on the west coast of Oregon, beneath the hills that used to boast the biggest trees in the history of the world. So this just sounded like an interesting cast of characters in this one. So Brian Doyle's Mink River, published back in 2010.
I like the cover too. So we're going to Seattle again for this. Is a thriller by Taryn Fisher, who lives in Seattle. Thursday's husband, Seth, has 2 other wives. She's never met them, and she doesn't know anything about them. She agreed to this unusual arrangement because she's so crazy about him. But one day she finds something that tells a very different and horrifying story about the man she married. So the wives.
He struggled with that book.
Did you?
Yes. Oh, gosh. A lot of people loved it. I was like, not so much.
Sometimes thrillers are like that. Like the twist is always something.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
My fourth pick is The Orchardist by Amanda Copland. This was published back in 2012. You belong to the earth, and the earth is hard. At the turn of the 20th century, in a rural stretch of the Pacific Northwest, in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, a solitary orchardist named Talmadge carefully tends the grove of fruit trees he has cultivated for nearly half a century. He's a gentle, solitary man, and he finds solace and purpose in the sweetness of the apples, apricots, and plums he grows, and in the quiet, beating heart of the land, the valley of yellow grass bordering a deep canyon that has been his home since he was 9 years old. Everything he is and has known is tied to this patch of earth. It is where his widowed mother is buried, taken by illness when he was just 13, and where his only companion, his beloved teenage sister Elsbeth, mysteriously disappeared. It is where the horse wranglers, native men pass through each spring with their wild herds, setting up camp in the flowering meadows between the trees, can be found. One day, while in town to sell his fruit at the market, 2 little girls, barefoot and dirty, steal some apples. Later, they appear on his homestead, cautious yet curious about the man who gave them no chase when they stole those apples. Feral, scared, and very pregnant, Jane and her sister Della take up on his land and indulge in his deep reservoir of compassion. Yet just as the girls begin to trust him, brutal men with guns arrive in the orchard, and the shattering tragedy that follows sets Talmadge on an irrevocable course, not only to save and protect them, putting himself between the girls and the world, but to reconcile the ghosts of his own troubled past. This sounds like a beautifully written book to me. It's described as transcribing America as it once was before railroads railways and roads connected its corners, the author weaves a tapestry of solitary souls who come together in the wake of unspeakable cruelty and misfortune, bound by their search to discover the place where they belong. So The Orchardist by Amanda Coplin.
So my last one, we're going back to Portland, but not in the woods nearby. We're going into the city. So this is The Residue Years by Mitchell Jackson, published in 2013. Mitchell Jackson grew up black in a neglected neighborhood in America's whitest city, Portland, Oregon. In the 90s, those streets beyond had fallen under the shadow of crack cocaine and its familiar mayhem. In his commanding autobiographical novel, Mitchell writes about what it is to come of age in that time and place with a breakout voice that's nothing less than extraordinary. The Residue Years switches between the perspectives of a young man, Champ, and his mother, Grace. Grace is just out of a drug treatment program, trying to stay clean and get her kids back. Champ is trying to do right by his mom and younger brothers and dreams of reclaiming the only home he and his family have ever shared. But selling crack is the only way he knows to achieve his dream. In this world of few options and little opportunity, where love is your strength and your weakness, this family fights for family and against what tears one apart. So, yeah, kind of a heavy one, but
yeah. My last pick is Deep River by Carl Melantis. He's the New York Times bestselling author of Matterhorn, if you're familiar with that. This one was published back in 2019. In this book, 3 Finnish siblings head for the logging fields of 19th century America. Born into a farm family, the 3 Koski siblings, see if I can pronounce their names, Ilmari, Matti, and Aino, are raised to maintain their grit and resiliency in the face of hardship. This lesson takes on special meaning when their father is arrested by Imperial Russian authorities, never to be seen again. Lured by the prospects of the Homestead Act, the brothers set sail for America, leaving young Aino behind, feeling betrayed and adrift after her Marxist cell is exposed, but follows soon after. The brothers establish themselves among a logging community in southern Washington, not far from the Columbia River. In this new world, they find themselves, Ilmari as the family's spiritual rock, Maddie as a fearless logger and entrepreneur, and Aino as a fiercely independent woman and union activist who is willing to make any sacrifice for the cause that sustains hers. Layered with fascinating historical detail, this novel bears witness to the stump-ridden fields that the loggers and the first waves of modern civilization leave behind. At its heart, Deep River explores the place of the individual and of the immigrant in an America still in the process of defining its own identity. So this one sounded like an interesting story, too. So check out Deep River.
Well, we hope that helped you find something to read and take a literary trip to the Pacific Northwest with us.
Thank you for watching. We hope we get our viewers back now that we're back with Friday Reads. You can find our videos on the Kimberly Public Library website, and Jill posts them out on our Facebook page. If you click under the tab that says for videos. Tell us what you're reading. Tell us if you've traveled to the Pacific Northwest and read a book that takes place out there. I found one other one, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Doesn't really take place, out there. I know she's in the ward out in Oregon State, but I think it's kind of fun to read books for where you go to different places and travel. So let us know what you're reading. We're happy to be back. And until next time, we thank you for watching. Bye-bye. Bye.